Crim 6 message received.
Alright guys, so we've covered some basic shooting fundamentals and shooting drills that you can practice dry fire or live fire at the range. So now what we're going to talk about is a little bit of commo, alright, a little bit of communication technology. Nothing too extravagant. Obviously I don't have the mental capacity to really explain and break down how all the frequencies work, how far each frequency can reach, and how you can mitigate or utilize those frequencies to better suit your situations. So, but what I can go over with you guys is some of the basic radios that you have access to that are very affordable and easy to use, and how you can better use them for your situations or your environments. So, we'll go straight into it. First one is one of these little cheapo Midlands. Get them at Walmart. Dirt cheap, and they reflect their price because they are garbage. So if you're lucky, you can maybe get a mile, 2 miles in certain situations. They're not bad as far as small communication around the house or around a ranch with children, stuff like that, where you don't have to worry about anything, you know, too important. Just because the frequencies on these are not the greatest, everybody has access to them. So a lot of people can be on your channel trying to talk. There are certain things that you can do to avoid those type of things, but we'll get into that later when we start talking about encryption and whatnot. But these little Midlands, they're definitely not something you want to risk your life on. They're not something you want to rely on to have those effective communications within a team or any sort of actual operational environment where, you know, somebody might get hurt and or killed. One good thing about these little Midlands, though, is they come with a variety of different stuff. Like, you got these real cheapo rinky-dink little headsets. They just clip on, nothing too extravagant. You know, you just put them on your ear. They just sit right there with a little microphone. There's a little push-to-talk button. These are terrible. The sound quality is garbage. The voice quality over it is garbage. These prongs, they break off very easily, but they're very cheap, affordable, and readily available. Then you get into a little bit higher grade setup. Again, fairly cheap, but reasonable. But here you get your little Secret Service earpiece, little lapel mic, or you can run the push to talk and the microphone down into your sleeve, just like the Secret Service guys tend to do, so they can be talking on their little radios and on their sleeves and everything. So you start getting into cooler stuff like that with these little Midlands, but there are other options out there, and we'll get into some of those here in a minute. So Midlands are covered, garbage. If you buy a couple of them just to have for your neighborhood or whatever, that's great. But definitely not something you're going to want to have for your personal being or your family or your readiness group, whatever you want to call it. Next, we're going to have some of these Baofeng UV5Rs. These things are incredible for the money that they cost and what you can do with them. This is one hell of a good buy. Okay, so you can buy these for like $20 on Amazon. You get quite a bit of features out of these. So what these are is basic ham radios. So these would be entry handheld ham radios, or they call them handy talkies. And so this will get you on the 2 meter and 70 centimeter frequency bands. I don't remember the exact. It's like 130 to 170 megahertz, and then 400 to 430 megahertz or something like that. But either way, these radios are very inexpensive. They've become extremely popular. For a while there, Amazon was sold out and you couldn't even get them on there. But these are great little radios. One of my favorite things about these radios is not only can you hear the national weather systems and reports, but you can, so okay, I'll wait till later, but basic semi-quasi encryption just to hide your communications a little bit better. These little rubber ducky antennas that come with them, these are complete and total garbage. You won't get very far with these, but with that being said, this other UV5R that I have has one of these little hanky-jank, little makeshift whip antennas. These, you can get these on Amazon. That's where I got mine. So it extends out quite a bit more. It does allow you to reach further. It's not like you're going to reach to the moon with it. Well, one, the radio doesn't have the power to do that, but two, the antenna is not that versatile. It's not that great, but it'll help definitely extend it out another 5, maybe 10 miles, depending on your situation, your terrain, and where you're at. And we'll get into that here in a little bit. But with a radio like this, with this antenna, and then a buddy of mine had, I think, the 888, which is basically a UV5R. We were getting 13 miles line of sight, or as the crow flies, and I live in town, he lives up on the side of the mountain. Quite a bit of vegetation between us, but 13 miles we were coming in relatively clear. We would have issues here and there, but 13 miles of this stretch is pretty good, especially out of little handheld radios. Then we get into my favorite kit radio. So as you can see, I have the antenna taken off. I also have my push-to-talk not on there, and you can see this one, it's got that Motorola style screw base and connections here, and that's why this is my favorite kit radio, because I'm able to put this in my kit, put my push-to-talk on here, and then it screws in there, holds it secure and tight, so you don't have these prongs sticking all sideways out like you do on the UV5Rs, which is terrible. They break extremely easy, especially if you're as rough on stuff as I am. So being able to screw that in and attach it and secure it so it's not going to break off is what makes this ideal for me. It's just an added benefit that this BF A58, it's still a Baofeng, but this one is dust proof and waterproof, has all the capabilities of the UV5R, same power range, everything. Easy to program. Obviously took a different cable to program it using a computer, but it's a great radio. So before we start getting into headsets and different methods of communicating on these radios, some of the pros and cons of these radios, or basically what communication is essential for. So a lot of people these days can obviously feel the political environment, the tensions rising throughout America, throughout the world. There's a lot of issues out there, so a lot of people are starting to prep. A lot of people are preparing for all sorts of things. But as people are starting to get into this side of being prepared or ready, or even just being an American, because everybody in America should have these basic fundamentals and be able to do all this stuff. One thing that people need to understand is that communication is more for just, hey Bill, it's Tom, what do you do? And you know, it's great that you can communicate like that, but when it comes down to the rubber meeting the road, radio communications are going to be essential for being able to coordinate fields of fire, movement, friendly and enemy, being able to do reconnaissance, being able to relay all this information quickly, effectively, and efficiently, and being able to get that information to where it needs to be so that that information can be effective or useful in general. So having radio communications is essential. You should utilize it all the time. Practice with it. I do. I let my kids play on these ones, not on the ham frequencies, just so you know. I am licensed, so I use the ham frequencies, obviously, but the kids aren't, and so there's no reason to go banging on doors. So using these radios, being able to switch between channels, being able to switch between frequencies, repeaters, especially if you don't know them by name and how you have them programmed into your radio, it can make things very difficult and tricky. So you have to program them, learn those programs, create a cheat sheet sometimes, and then follow along with it and utilize it every day as you're driving around. Just flip it on, see what you can hear, scan. I scan all the time, and I've got a mounted radio in my Jeep that I run all the time just to hear what's going on anywhere around. So it's good to understand that stuff and how to use it. And if you don't practice using these radios, like these Baofengs, they're cheap, very easy to use, but if you don't have a computer to program them, it is extremely time consuming, it is tedious, monotonous, it is soul crushing to program these radios by hand unless you know these radios really well and you just sit there like an old school Nokia phone and just beep, 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 beep. That's great. I'm not that good at them. So I use a computer to program them, but I still use them and play with them and try to remember which repeaters go where, try to switch between dual band, single channel, all that different type of stuff. If you don't use it, you will lose it. You'll forget how to use the radios, how they're supposed to be, and how they're easily used to be the most effective. So I hate to really stress on that, but it has to be done. You got to use it. So some of the pros of having like these Baofeng radios, these little handheld ham radios. So you can get extremely long range out of them. These little Motorola's or Midlands, they're using like 1 or 2 watts. These Baofengs are running 5 watts. So when it comes to radio communication, your range is going to be greatly decided not only by your radio frequency that you're using, but by the power wattage that you're producing, that you're putting out through that radio system. So the higher wattage you're pushing out as you hit that push to talk, the further, in theory, your signal will go. So all that's going to depend on your frequency, your terrain, the weather outside. A lot of things play into effect on your range that you can get with these radios. But the most important thing to remember for right now, doing the basics, is 5 watts to 10 watts. You're going to be getting pretty good solid range out of these handheld radios. Radios make getting messages to and from people extremely fast and very, very easy. When you've got a critical information, you've got a message like Tom just got shot, and you guys are out hunting and you're in the middle of nowhere. Well, you got buddies at your base camp. Hey, as easy as a push of a button. Tom got shot, send help. As long as they know where you're at, or you have a GPS and you could tell them right then and there, that is extremely fast communication. That could save a life, could save hundreds of lives, having communication that quickly and that easily. This is faster than calling on a cell phone. But if nobody else has a radio, it's not going to do you any good. So you kind of have to work together and get your team together with radio communications. So as you can see, these can be extremely small. This is small with no antenna, and this is small with a folding antenna. So, excuse me. If we unfold this antenna and start measuring them up side by side, clearly this will be a smaller package, right? And you might be asking yourself, why does this little radio not have an antenna? Well, I have a vest-mounted antenna system on my kit that I run with this radio so that I can keep this radio as small and as low profile as possible, so I can keep it in a radio pouch where it is extremely tucked away, less risk of damage being done to it other than direct impact damage. So, yeah, great little radio, this one. Multiple channels, multiple frequencies. With these little Baofengs, I've been told that you can program in the same frequencies that these little Midlands use, and something called GMRS. People who are familiar with radios or side-by-sides and stuff like that might be familiar with it. But those are basically 2 free-to-use frequencies. The GMRS, I believe you're supposed to pay to get a license for it. The Midland radios that you can buy on the FRS frequencies, I think it's like the family radio system or something like that. Those are completely free, no license required for them. It's not a bad frequency range. It's just not meant to go very far. But when you start plugging those frequencies into these Baofengs, they start to reach quite far, especially compared to these little Midlands. These antennas are garbage. The power output is garbage. Just a lot of bad things about these ones. So, as you progress and start learning all these Baofengs will take 128 channels, 124 channels, something like that, and you can program it by channel or by frequency, and you can switch between going through the memory channel or the frequency channels, and that makes life real easy, especially when you got to switch over to something on the fly. Because if you've got it set on your memory channels, so you've got a bunch of repeaters and you've got a bunch of different frequencies that you and your team or your element, your neighborhood is going to be using, you can easily hit a button once, it switches it over to frequency mode, and then you can just literally plug in a frequency, 1, 4, 8, 2, 3, and now you're plugged in, you're ready to communicate on that frequency. And then as soon as you're done there, you can switch it back over to your memory channel and go to channel 42, because you know that's the channel that you and all your people have talked about and arranged ahead of time. That's pretty quick. It's pretty simple. It's pretty easy, but again, you got to practice it. Got to learn it and practice it. So, with all this talks of channels and frequencies, so if you and your group have coordinated and decided to put together a set list of frequencies that you guys want to use, so, excuse me, everybody from Bill's family that lives on 3rd Street to the west, they're all going to be on channel 42, okay, which is a FRS frequency, let's say. And then everybody at Tom's house who lives from Yeager Street north, they're all going to be on channel 43. And then everybody from Sally's house, you know, and so on and so forth, 44, 45. And then there'll be one specific channel that everybody can jump onto to relay information to everybody. And then everyone still has their own separate channels for their families. So you would basically be coming up with a frequency list for everyone to utilize with that one primary channel to disseminate the mass information, right? So that might get a little confusing for some people, and especially if everybody has a radio, they get word, oh, there's going to be a big message coming out at 1600, you know, some big news just came down the wire from somewhere. Okay, so everyone wants to plug in to that one main channel. So everyone's on channel 52 now, and somebody starts putting out a message. Well, everybody's keying in, trying to ask questions. How much communication is really going to be going on that channel? Not a lot. So channels get extremely busy, and sometimes it is extremely aggravating to keep people off the channels and to understand how the radio frequencies work and how the traffic on the radios really is disadvantageous to, you know, effective communications. Another con for these kind of radios is line of sight. With putting out such a low power range, line of sight is going to be essential for a lot of these radios to work effectively. Like I said, 13 miles, I was getting through vegetation, through power lines. We've got a Walmart. We've got a whole bunch of crap in between my house and my buddy's place up on the side of the mountain. The only one thing we did have going for us is he is slightly elevated above where I'm at. Probably not by much, a few hundred feet at most. But that few hundred feet does help. So when I'm in my Jeep and I'm using my mobile rig, oh my God, I can hear him clear as day. And he can hear me clear as day, but also I'm putting out a lot more power out of that thing. And better antenna. A lot of different things happening there. Just to understand that power equals range, okay? And if you have a lot of vegetation in between you and where you're trying to communicate to, you're going to lose a lot of range. All right? Just think of it as screen doors. You're trying to squirt somebody with a squirt gun through 15 screen doors. Are you going to squirt them? Maybe get a little mist. That's where you'll be coming in all staticky. They can't really hear you effectively. Take away a couple of them screen doors. Okay, now you're getting droplets on them. They get it. Take away a few more screen doors. Now you're starting to get a little bit more of a stream coming through. If you get rid of all those screen doors, you'll get a direct stream at them, get them completely soaked. They'll hear you loud and clear. Another con for these kind of radios, especially if you're trying to do any sort of, I don't want to say secretive, but some sort of stuff you don't want everybody to hear about, is everybody can hear about it. Okay? These are frequencies that are easily monitored. Every ham guy in the area has probably got some sort of a base station set up, and they're scanning all the frequencies all the time just to hear what's happening. So the chances of you being overheard by other people is quite high. There are certain things that you can do to mitigate how much you can be overheard, but you cannot encrypt these. We'll get into that here in a little bit. So another big issue with being able to be heard is you can be tracked and triangulated quite easily. Every time you push that button, you're sending out a signal. If multiple people are set up in different areas and they have direction finding stuff, even if all they do is hold the radio to their chest and they're just turning and then, oh, I hear them straight ahead this way, they can shoot an azimuth with a compass, look at a map, talk to their buddy on their radio, find out what their azimuth is. They can draw it out on a map and have you triangulated in under 5 minutes. shit, under 2 minutes sometimes. So, easily tracked with these kind of radios. And that's partially because of non-encryption, but it's also just you're putting out a frequency. It's not impossible for people to be able to track that frequency. With the channels getting busy, communication being a lot of people getting stepped on while trying to communicate on those specific channels or frequencies. One thing that usually ends up happening, that it almost certainly has to happen, is a whole new language has to be created for the radio use. All right, in the military they call it pro words. Civilian side they call it code words, a whole bunch of stuff. But if I need, let's say I need to talk to Bill, Ted, and Susie, right, and I need to talk to them right now, I could come up with a code word that we all discuss and we all agree on, and I can get on there and just be like Budweiser, get off the net. Everyone else understands Budweiser. They all know what it means. They tell Bill, Tom, and Sally, and then we all meet up and drink beers or talk about whatever. So code words like that are very crucial, very essential, especially when there's a busy traffic busy traffic on the frequency, sorry. So that covers the majority of the basic pros and cons of any of these types of radios. There are different types, like we were talking about. This Midland radios, these are designed and programmed for the FRS frequencies, family radio systems. You can open these up and install new crystals and stuff like that. You can get these, from what I understand, you can get these to talk on CB channels. Mine don't. I've never even thought about having somebody set them up to do that, but it can be done. I don't know about on the CB frequencies, but anyways, you can extend the power and the range from these quite extensively if you know how to tweak them. But again, that's operating on the FRS frequencies, so the family radio system. And then you start getting into these Baofengs, and these come set up straight out of the box to operate on the 2 meter and 70 centimeter bands. So if you're looking for more information on that, you'll have to start Googling, do a lot of research, learn a lot of it like I did. But the 2 meter and 70 centimeter bands are quite popular. They're easy to get into. I've never been on a frequency that is so busy with traffic you can never get a word in. You can always talk on the 2 meter and 70 centimeter bands. So one type of radio I do not have here, but eventually will, is a digital radio, or a DMR. These digital radios are quite nice because it's a quasi-encryption. Because the frequency that you're putting out, all the signal you're distributing out into the wild is digital, the only way for somebody to receive it is to be able to receive digital frequencies. And it's pulsing your signal out. So instead of it just being a squirt gun holding steady and just sending it, as you're talking, it's sending it out in little bursts. It's kind of hard to explain. I'm not very good at explaining it. But DMR is actually really cool, and I'm hoping to get into it real soon here. That's as close as to encryption as you'll be able to get, because then you can start really fine-tuning your channels and whatnot, so that other people have to have certain things in place to be able to receive that signal clearly. And we'll get into encryption here shortly. So there's also the HF. So these are UHF and VHF signals. And then you have high frequency HF signal. That's what people are using to talk to the space shuttle. That's what or the International Space Station. That's what people are talking around the world with, is HF primarily. There are some instances where the VHF, UHF frequencies can get there, but you got to have one hell of a power setup. And then there's also the mobile setups. So the radio that I have set up in my Jeep, I have set up just like these Baofengs. All right, I have them programmed with the exact same channel scheme, so that from when I go from this radio to inside the Jeep, I don't have to be remembering like, oh, which radio is this set up for? It's already set up. I already know what frequencies or what channels to go to get the repeater that I need. So that's real handy, and that Jeep can really reach. I think one of the primary repeater that I jump onto, I think, is a little about 30, maybe 40 miles away from me. I hear it clear as day. They hear me, and I've talked to people on there all the way from Kansas. Okay, and that's from the Jeep on low power. So set it up on the high power, and it'll reach out and touch somebody pretty far. So moving straight on along here to encryption. Encryption on any of these civilian radios is illegal. So military, police, law enforcement, first responders, all these guys, they have quasi encryption. Military for sure has encryption, but a lot of the law enforcement, first responders, they're starting to go to something called trunking. You'll have to Google it to really get into it, but it's just a digital format. So it's not impossible to overhear it. It's not impossible to eavesdrop on them. It's just a digital form, and it cannot be done with these. Whereas there are still, where I'm at, there are still some local law enforcement that will talk on these frequencies, and I can hear them. But when the officers are talking back to dispatch, you can't hear them. So it's kind of crazy. But there's oh man, it gets complicated the further you dig into it. But it's fun. It's fun once you start learning it, and especially as you start hearing things that you didn't think you'd be able to. It's pretty cool. Excuse me. So one thing you can do with these Baofengs that is easy as hell to do. It's not encryption, but you can set it up to where you're transmitting on one signal, on one frequency, and you're receiving on a totally different one. So it's literally like having two different soup cans on a string, and you're talking over here and listening over here, and this one has a bunch of people listening, and this side has a bunch of people listening over there, but they cannot hear each other. So they're only going to hear one side of the conversation. Like I was talking about, I can hear dispatch for the first responders, but I cannot hear the officers or the EMS guys. It's one-sided, and so it's not hard to do. It takes a little bit of research, but if you got a computer and you're programming these radios yourself, it's not hard. But you can do that and set that up for as many channels as you can set up all 128 channels that way. But if nobody else has the same setup, they'll never hear you or you'll never hear them. Because if they're just scanning and they pick something up on your frequency and they're like, oh, there's somebody there trying to talk, but you're set up to not hear that, you're set up to hear it from a different frequency, then it won't work. So there's a lot to it, but it's not encryption. It's just merely hiding one side of the conversation. But if somebody has a really big ham base station at their house or in their garage set up, they can figure it out, and they can tune in and be able to catch both sides of it pretty easily. Again, DMR, the digital radios, again, not encryption, but it's a lot easier to hide your signal, your transmissions from anybody else that might be out there listening. So it is kind of nice that you can do it so easily and be able to program in, because they do make some of these handhelds where it's VHF, UHF, and DMR digital. So you could set up quite a bit of a one-sided conversation for people to try to track and listen to, where you're transmitting on digital, but you're listening in on VHF or UHF. So that would make things a little bit harder for other people to hear what's going on with your conversation. Again, not impossible, but it'll just make things a little bit harder for them. So with these two radios, the one thing that I'll hint on, because there's a lot of stuff out there for it. So these are a couple of different setups. This is a Peltor Comtac 3 or something like that. I don't remember. These are pretty damn pricey, but these are damn nice. Amplified hearing muffs, earmuffs, and it came with a microphone, and it's using a NATO style plug. So what I had to do was I had to go to Disco 32 and buy a little push-to-talk adapter so that I can plug into this radio and then plug this phone jack straight into my push-to-talk without having to have a whole bunch of different pieces like what I'm about to show you here. Because this one is MSA Sordins. Got them off of eBay, pretty cheap, a couple $100. I don't know if they're legitimate. I kind of doubt it because it's already split in here to where you can see all the cables in there. Nothing's broken on it. It's all working and functioning fine. It's just Kind of wished it wasn't falling apart already. So with this one here, this one I had to get an adapter because it has this crazy, probably can't really see it in here, but it's like a half moon shaped connection in there with three prongs in there, and then 3 prongs outside that half moon shape. So I had to get this adapter so that I can plug into it and have a NATO style plug to use with the Disco 32 push to talks. So having one adapter piece is a lot nicer than having to have like 15 from the radio, 15 from the headset, which obviously is an exaggeration. But there are different stuff out there and different companies that make the stuff. I like Disco 32. Also, I've got that vest mounted antenna system, works great. Yeah, guys, there's a lot of stuff out there. Do your research, look into it. If you're not sure what kind of radio to buy, all the hams that I've ever talked to, they always say buy the best radio that you can afford. Okay, it's not the best radio out there, it's just the best that you can afford right now. If the best you can afford is a digital and VHF, UHF radio, hell yeah, more power to you. That's great. I mean, they're only, $200 to $300 depending on which brand you get. If the best you can do is a UV5R, if the best you can do is get a UV5R, then get a UV5R and train up on it, read up on it, practice, play around with it. You can hear the International Space Station on these radios. All right, the space station is putting out a lot of power, and they're calling all the way down here to Earth all the time. You just got to go on the website, find out when they'll be flying over your area, because they've got to be fairly close for you to catch them. But you can hear them on the UV5R, and it's pretty cool. But you only hear the one side. Again, they've got that set up to where they're talking on one frequency, receiving on another. So if you've got 2 radios, or you go in there and hey, go, you go. You're causing a mess. So if you go in there and you learn how to set this up to do a dual watch, you can literally monitor both of those frequencies at the same exact time. These radios aren't the greatest at them. The rig that I have set up in my Jeep is phenomenal for dual watch. All right, guys, I think that's going to go ahead and cover our commo session for today. Pretty soon here I'll be getting out and about and doing a shoot and communicate video, so you'll be able to monitor and track and understand how shooting and communicating starts to come into play, and how it all comes together, and how it can benefit or make it harder. Again, make sure you guys get some radios, get practiced on them, learn about it, research it, have fun with it. It's definitely a lot of fun when you get more people on these radios, and you guys can start communicating from all over the place, doing all kinds of crazy crap. Makes it a lot of fun. Doing it by yourself is boring as hell. So, all right, guys. Thanks for watching. Make sure you check back. Click the button down below to subscribe. Remember, train hard, rest easy.